Good morning. It is Tuesday, September 30th, and I'd like to call this regular school board workshop to order. Please stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good morning, fellow board members, Mr. Deputy Superintendent, Natalie, staff and the public. Appreciate you guys being here today. As we get started, we do actually have a public input card today from Miss Elizabeth Emery from LCEA, if you'd like to come up.
Hi, good morning, Board, Deputy Superintendent. We're really excited to hear the status of the audit this morning. We had some great conversations with our audit folks, so we're excited to see what they're going to bring today. We hadn't heard if the audit for instructional materials did actually go out, so I'm hoping that we'll get an update on that today. And I did also want to thank the Board for your kind words and closing remarks, as well as the Superintendent. I know our educators really appreciated that at the last school board meeting. Hearing from you all really makes a difference. And as an alumni and Lake County School educator and taxpayer, I really appreciate it myself. And I appreciate all you do for Lake County Schools. I know that you all deeply care about Lake County Schools, and I've seen that firsthand working with you all and the collaboration, the work that you all do. So I'm grateful for that personally. But not all 2,900 instructional employees know that, right? So I think the best way that you can communicate your belief in them is by showing their value. So I'll ask that you consider that today as you deliberate. And we're looking forward to bargaining this afternoon at 4:30. So thank you all.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you again, Mr. Mathias, for that suggestion on including LCEA in the audit. I thought that was very timely. All right, that is the only card we got this morning. So we're going to move on to item 3.01, the internal audit report. RSM, if you'd like to come up.
Hi, everyone. So we're here to deliver 2 of our 3 reports from our audit plan that you all had approved. So we're here today to present our competitive procurement, and instructional materials. We are still vetting the cybersecurity maturity assessment. We've vetted it with management, so now we need to vet it with the superintendent's office, and then we'll bring that final report to you all as well. So I have here today Jack Hughes, who will go through our procurement report, and also Ava Dorasamy, who you're all familiar with, for the instructional materials. It was very important for us to take our time with these reports. These were our first reports, with Lake County Schools for some time now. I have with us Jennifer Murtha, who leads our government services industry for our firm. But we're talking about when the last time she was here, probably 15 to 18 years ago. So she's the one that was leading this when we were last with Lake County Schools. So it was really important for us to make sure that we got to know management got to know us. And we talked to you, when we presented to you all earlier last year, we talked about the importance of building trust as we go through this process as well. Internal audit, sometimes it can be very intimidating what we do and how we audit, right? So we wanted to make sure we were building trust with management, really listening to them, understanding them, trying to understand their processes, and what works best for Lake County Schools. That was very important for us as we were going through this process. So we really wanted to take our time to make sure that we were listening to management and really making sure that we were getting to the right issues and what's important to them. So we're happy to be here today and present these reports to you. I'll turn it over to Jack.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Clara. Can I be heard okay?
Yes, sir.
Mic's working? Wonderful. I'll walk us through our competitive procurement report. Just to give a high-level kind of overview of the structure of our report, we do have an executive summary on page 2. That gives a really 50,000-foot view of the structure of our report. We have a background, which is pretty comprehensive, beginning on page 4. That gives another overview of the different processes related to competitive procurement, including some of the procurement types that are leveraged by the district. We have an objectives and approach section, which you'll find beginning on page 8, before getting into our observation matrix on page 10. I'll very quickly move into going through our observations, unless there are any questions about the rest of the structure of our report.
Board, any questions? Please proceed.
Wonderful. Our first observation, titled Procurement Compliance, is broken into two pieces with subsections there, formal advertisement and procurement documentation. As it relates to formal advertisement, what we noted is that all formal solicitations are posted to the online vendor link system, which does facilitate a very broad outreach to a range of potential vendors. However, there is an existing board policy, PO 6322, which requires construction-related solicitations to advertise that solicitation in a newspaper of general circulation for a period of time. What we noted during our review is that there is no established process in place to advertise those competitive solicitations in the manner prescribed currently by board policy. And we did see a couple instances in our sample selection related to those competitive solicitation construction solicitations. For procurement documentation, we noted one sole source procurement did not retain a finalized executed vendor contract within the procurement file. Without that complete documentation, the district may be unable to support some of those purchasing decisions. So that was the risk identified as it relates to some of that procurement documentation. Yes.
I had a quick question, if we can go back there, about the newspaper advertisement. Is there
Yes.
anything that is statutory or state obligated for us to follow that, or is it just something through board policy that maybe came over from Neola that maybe we don't have to?
Yeah, great question. There is existing statute that does provide guidance on the advertisement of that type of solicitation. I think when we coordinated with the legal counsel, the interpretation was that that statute didn't necessarily apply to the district, which is why we cited board policy.
Okay, so
as
it's just a board policy issue.
the board policy issue. And within our recommendation, we do say that we recommend that either procurement reevaluates its procedures and establishes a process to adhere to that board policy, or consider making a recommendation to the board to change that policy to reflect its current practice of advertising using the vendor link system.
Okay.
Any questions about observation one?
Nope, I don't think so.
Perfect. Observation 2, titled Selection Committees, split into 3 subsections. Subsection number 1, Selection Committee Representation. We noted that the Selection Committee membership often is primarily composed of the department or end user group representation, and we did not necessarily identify evidence that representatives with financial expertise or with that financial background provided insight as to those evaluation committee members. And so we're not necessarily saying that it did not occur, but we were unable to verify evidence that that financial expertise and insight was solicited by the evaluation committee. As it relates to the selection committee composition itself, we did note that members of the public may occasionally be involved in the selection committee process for those solicitations. Currently, the committee relies on conflict of interest self-disclosure forms, but with members of the public, it may be difficult to identify the accuracy of those self-disclosures, and that the current process did not necessarily include a robust type of evaluatory procedure to attest that that disclosure was accurate and up to date, specifically for members of the public. And then finally, as it relates to construction-related competitive procurements, as it currently exists, vendors are shortlisted by that selection committee. Those shortlisted vendors then fully present to the board, and the board is ultimately tasked with scoring those vendors and making the final selection and award decision. In our experience working with school districts, that is a unique type of relationship here at Lake. You're one of the only ones that we work with that has that type of structure. And while it's not inherently incorrect or wrong, I think there are opportunities to improve efficiency by leveraging the selection committee and that shortlisting structure. And so within our recommendation, we do have 2 bullet points, 3 and 4. If the board wishes to maintain its current evaluatory role in selecting those shortlisted vendors, they consider implementing a conflict of interest attestation to provide for additional disclosures and transparency as an award an awarding entity. Alternatively, the board could revise its current role such that the identified selection committee, as it exists currently, continues its current role, but also performs an evaluation scoring of its shortlisted vendors as a
Where
two-part
in this
phase.
packet is the document you're reading from?
That is page 13. I'm on page 13 in our recommendation. The observation itself, primarily on page 12 there.
It's this?
It should be the competitive solicitation
Is
report.
yours not more detailed? Oh, you're reading it right from there. Okay.
I have bits and pieces highlighted, absolutely.
Okay. Sorry, thanks.
Any questions? I know that's a three-part kind of observation with the selection committee and then the board role. Any questions, comments, or concerns about the content here within?
So the conflict of interest, right now, people are self-declaring if they've got some sort of conflict of interest.
Correct,
So
which is common and
Right.
in line with best practice.
I would think so. So short of us hiring a private investigator to find out whether or not they were accurate or not, what are other districts or other entities doing that?
I think that's what we want to highlight. There is an inherent risk, especially with members of the public. It's a little easier with the existing procedures in place with district employees to determine their background and potential conflicts there. But as it relates to members of the outside public, while they may have a breadth of expertise, it's more difficult to identify their background and potential conflicts, which is
All right.
the inherent risk there.
I think I heard you say inherent risk, but it's a best practice.
Best practice to perform some type of attestation coupled with a robust background check, if applicable.
Okay.
And what we see sometimes is Sunbiz, for instance, research there, different companies must disclose, voting personnel and key stakeholders within that. I believe that's currently being performed by management. We just want to highlight that risk with the members of the public.
Let me ask, Holly, are we requiring them to sign like a Form 1?
Well, not Form 1, we have a attestation form, it's a 7-pager that goes through the rules and all that, and we have them sign those forms, all evaluators.
And generally speaking, correct me if I'm wrong, Ollie, but the only time members of the public have been involved were in, like, for example, Mineola Horizons, when Mineola had a couple members involved in that process and other projects of that variety. But the general procurement process or shortlisting doesn't include members of the public outside of staff?
Yeah, only in we include the public in construction projects only.
Yeah.
Everything else is all internal.
Okay.
Any other comments regarding observation 2? Perfect. Observation 3 then on page 14. In our review, we identified one vendor profile which was missing an updated IRS Form W-9. We did note that while that form was not up to date, no payments to that vendor had been remitted since the expiry of that W-9 form. And through our review, we noted with discussions with management that efforts had been made with that vendor to obtain an updated form. So the expectation, there should be an updated form on file. We were unable to identify that, but management is currently in the process of getting an up-to-date form. And no payments were made in the time where we did not have up-to-date documentation.
And the only other comment I'll add here is for almost every single competitive procurement internal audit that we've done, there's a vendor documentation observation. In our experience, there's normally like 5 to 6 bullet points of things that are missing. So having just the one W-9 absent in this case was a very positive story. It's rare that we see something that's this clean.
Absolutely. So all in all, pretty good result there as it relates to some of that documentation. Our last observation, titled Procedure Manual, we identified several critical procurement activities that are being performed but do not have a documented procedure manual to accompany it. Procurement Services has noted that they are indeed in the process of finalizing a comprehensive procedure manual intended to supplement existing board policies. Based on our experience within our recommendation, we've aggregated some of the key points as it relates to competitive solicitation processes to consider as part of that manual. And I believe management intends to publish that and finalize it within the coming months. And Ollie, I believe that's still correct? Perfect. So I think that's all to come pretty shortly here.
And just to summarize, we talked about this in observation number 3. We do procurement a lot for our school districts, even for our other government entities. This is a pretty clean report. We were pretty pleased with what we were seeing. So you should feel comfortable too on your procurement staff and what they're doing and the controls that they have in place. We take a very broad risk-based approach on how we approach this, the risks that are associated with competitive procurement, what controls should be in place, and really getting in there and digging and testing and just making sure that controls are operating the way that they're intended to operate. So this was a pretty clean report.
Thank you, Ava. Board, any comments on this one?
Nope.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate what Ava said. Ollie, thank you for the great work that you and your team continue to do. Going back through this, we've got an outdated policy for us to update on our end, and we need to look at how we continue to do the construction part on our end, but not for what you guys do day in and day out there and going through the rest of it. But excellent work per usual, and just want to thank you for what you do. All right.
Next.
Yep, next one, Ava.
All righty. Okay, you should have in front of you, I don't know that this, okay. Thank you for whoever is manning the report in the back for me. Okay, I will be walking through the instructional materials utilization internal audit report. And first, before I get started, I know that we have the entire team behind me, and they have done a phenomenal job in getting us the documentation that we've requested. I know there was a lot of documentation that we requested, and they were probably the most organized that I've ever seen documents come to us. And just overall, absolute pleasure to work with. So we were really excited to get into the details of this report. And similar structure as what Jack mentioned for competitive procurement, we always have an executive summary, that one-stop shop for kind of, if you have 5 seconds, that's the place to read. Background on page 4, that's where it starts, has information on the adoption process, forecasting, some roles and responsibilities, some financial data, regulatory requirements, all just intended for the reader to have some context, because instructional materials is such a broad subject area. So we wanted to kind of set the stage before we get into objectives and approach, which is on page 12. And as you recall, the information on this page should look very familiar. It's a direct reflection of our statement of work. But as a refresher, our goal here was to take a look at the control structure around how instructional materials are ordered, what volume is purchased, how need is calculated, what are the inventory management procedures that we have in place spread throughout central district offices and decentralized school sites, and how we're adhering to policies regarding instructional materials, purchase, and utilization. So that was big goal. And stepping into the observations next, which start on page 14, you'll see the results in our observations themselves. Starting with observation 1, this is related to instructional material inventory control. Overall, we found some inconsistencies in where material is stored, how material is checked out for use, how inventory plans are documented and submitted, how inventory is received, the procedures that are, like I mentioned previously, very briefly handled decentralized at each of the school locations. There's a lot of responsibilities, as you can imagine, related to textbook and supplemental material use at the school sites. So just some areas where the actual use, checkout, tracking, monitor procedures can be tightened. I'll talk a little bit later in a subsequent observation about some of the expectations for textbook managers and how detailed those expectations are. This observation is intended to highlight some of the areas where we can tighten up those controls. And I'll also mention that this is based off of our testing of 5 school sites. And we take a risk-based approach always when we do our internal audits. We don't want to, I think a good analogy is we don't want to have the doctor go to the healthiest patient. Right. We want to be able to take a look at areas where schools or textbook managers or personnel can be struggling for any reason, and then start there and make sure we can tighten controls to address any issues that we may find. Not necessarily that these are issues, I'd say they're really just opportunities to tighten up those controls. And so the selection of those school sites were based off of, one, an analysis of financial data, where's the spend going, where are the materials going, and then also some of the discussions with management. So I wanted to make sure that that's clear in the get-go, that this is not a sampling of all schools. This is a risk-based sampling of 5 schools.
So let me ask a little bit more about that, because I think my understanding is you kind of went back and forth with management about the what ended up here in the report in terms of what line you printed. Honing in on this one, we judgmentally selected 5 inherently high-risk schools. Were all 5 of those high-risk schools?
Not all
My understanding
5.
was one of them was an exemplar, right?
Yes.
So
yes.
why is that grouped in with the high-risk schools?
We wanted to make sure that we also could take a look at, okay, we have some schools that are maybe considered high risk. We also have an example of a school that's doing well, so that we can address if there are any inconsistencies in how schools are operating, it's clear, and kind of be able to do a compare and contrast.
So why wouldn't you write that in your report?
That there's a,
Because you grouped them all together as 5 inherently high-risk schools, but we know one of them is an exemplar. And to illustrate your point that why would the doctor go to the healthiest patient, that's exactly what you did, but you didn't call out that that's what you did. And then I guess the other part of me is wondering more about the random sampling. So if you target specifically the high-risk schools, we already knew that there are challenges or obstacles at those particular schools. So when we look at here and we see 3 schools didn't do this or 4 schools didn't do that, I don't know that gives me a sampling of the entire district. I don't know, right? I know at these 5 schools, or 4 schools that we already knew about.
right, we can't take a look at every single school.
No, but
And
isn't there a sampling that goes into
yes,
auditing?
Yes, absolutely. And taking a risk-based approach, I think that sentence, our goal was to say, this is how we approach sampling. We can absolutely clarify language and say 4 high-risk schools and 1 school that's exemplar. I think that's a verbiage update. But our intent is to highlight that these schools were selected intentionally. But
Right.
to your point,
And I
we can
think
clarify
that
language.
point is good, yes, to mention that they're selected intentionally. This is not just some random sampling. We can't say, well, 3 of these schools didn't do that, so 60% of the schools across the
Right.
district are also in the same boat. No, you specifically targeted 4 schools that you knew had some challenges, 1 school that was an exemplar, but all 5 of those got grouped as high risk. Yeah.
I 100% see what you're saying. Yep, absolutely.
I'm just
And I
trying to,
think
I'm
that's
just trying to
just
call
a-
it out how it really is. That's all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. We're not intending to say we took a look at 5 schools and you can extrapolate that to the entire population. That's why we wanted to say high risk. But to your point, we absolutely can clarify the language that it's 4 high risk, 1 exemplary. I think that's a simple update to the language.
And who picked the schools?
We began our sample selection by doing some data analytics on overall purchasing trends. And what we noted, all 5 of those schools are represented as big purchasers or big, recipients of instructional materials. And so while we understood with management that a selection of those 5 had difficulties in managing inventory or communicating with the district, all 5 could be considered high risk based on the amount of materials being received on an annual basis, or at least through the duration of our audit period.
I guess where I feel disappointed on this one is that because your sampling is not very wide or random, we just have no idea if the challenges are isolated to these 3 particular schools that the management already knew about and called out to you to feed it to you in the audit, or if it's more widespread across the district. I don't know.
Our recommendations are geared towards the entire district. So on the
But we don't even know if it's a problem at most of the other schools, right? Based on the audit and how you approached it.
I mean, this is whether we're looking at something like instructional materials, whether we're looking, I'll give timekeeping as an example. We can't go to every school, right? We have to pick a sample. And part of our process, like Jack said, we looked at the spend. So technically, even the one that does things well, it does have high-risk components because of its spend. But yes, we can still modify that sentence. But even back to, let's say if we were doing timekeeping, we would still select 5 schools, and we would work with the district, this is what we're seeing with different classifications, this is who we think have more high risk because of the different attributes. Who do you think you need more hand-holding with? Who do you think does things better, because we want to make sure that we're getting a mix, whether it's 3 that need more hand-holding or 2 that do things better or 4 that need more hand-holding and 1 that does things better. Because then you can kind of see whether or not some of those controls are operating as intended, throughout the district. That's how we do our judgmental sample, so we can make sure that we're getting to the cusp of the risk and seeing how we can make sure that the risk is being controlled.
I think we'll just have to disagree on how you pick a sample, because I recognize that you're not going to go to every single school, but I think it's also challenging for us to know, are these isolated to these three schools that were handed to you, or is it more widespread? Like, I think in auditing, you pull kind of a random sample and figure out, but that's okay.
Yeah, but-
I'm ready to
Doesn't
move
this
on.
create a roadmap for us to go as a district and look at these other schools?
Yes.
But who's got the labor or time to do that is my wondering, because they're a department of 2. And I think as I read through this report, a lot of your observations are what's going on in this school setting. That department, I don't know that has any supervisory powers over the textbook managers. And so I don't know what,
Well, isn't that a discussion internally for us?
Perhaps.
on the side?
Perhaps.
I want to go back to the core so I understand. From 30,000 feet, you looked at the spend. And then from that spend, you looked at the largest elementary, and the largest middle, and the largest high school. Is that how you got this random sampling?
Correct. Well, I wouldn't call it necessarily random. It was still judgmental, but we started with that spend. And to get diversity across different school types, we made sure to include an elementary, a K through 8, a middle, a high school. We then took that sample. We had selected 5. We went to management and said, these are schools that we see that may be inherently high risk. We actually had pretty considerable overlap when we wanted to get their input from the process owners to say, where do you see controls may break down? Which schools have difficulties or different unique challenges that stress the controls that are currently in place? And so we had pretty significant overlap with our originally identified selection of schools, which gave us comfort to proceed forward with that selection.
If I may, I think it's extremely important that we hear your report. I don't think this is the time for us to start trying to defend what you're presenting to us. I think we need to hear what you're saying with an open mind. And then once you've done that, if we see some, what we might consider biases or other things, certainly there's a time and a place to bring that up. But I can attest to the fact that the way you chose your sampling is very similar to when DOE comes in for ESE files, or they randomly pick schools like that. So
This wasn't random. They were hand-fed the schools.
but it was based on criteria.
Okay.
And that's the same way ESC does it. That's the same way Title
I'm
I
ready to hear
does
the rest of the
it.
report.
I think that's what we should do.
I'm happy to get into observation number 2 then. Okay, that's on page 16. This observation is related to material forecasting and ordering. We did find that there are certain criteria that the department recommend is used in the forecasting process. That could be full-time equivalent student counts, data within focus, proposed order numbers submitted by the textbook managers, actual course enrollment. When visiting our sampled schools in person and speaking with the textbook managers, we ask questions: how did you come up with this order? What type of information are you looking for? And we did find that there is some inconsistency in what data points are being used. And then in the subsequent bullets, you'll see that we did also take a look at what inventory was actually on site and tried to see if there's any surplus inventory. We did find that one of the schools had ordered double the amount of materials needed for a semester-based course. In discussing that further with that particular site, it wasn't identified that a single set of required course material could be used for both semesters. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the recommendation in a moment. And then the 4 remaining sampled schools, they had some surplus order quantity that ranged from 10 to 29%. Of course, we do expect some surplus to make sure that there's no instance where a child doesn't have their textbook when school starts. So this is just a matter of, again, kind of tightening those controls related to forecasting and ordering. And you'll see the management action plan does talk about collaborating with school leadership to confirm the course offerings as part of the forecasting and ordering process to get those site-specific data points, coordinating with school schedulers regarding course enrollments, coordinating a date for master schedule submission in conjunction with textbook ordering. So again, that's another instance of getting an additional data point before submitting the forecasted order. And continue to implement a staggered approach to ordering. That's something that the team had implemented fairly recently, as well as staggering the order, so that if there is ever an instance where we need to pause on an order, we are able to do that. Their estimated completion date is August 2026.
So in any of those schools where they had seemingly over-ordered, was there a declining enrollment in any of those schools that might have contributed to that, or was it just that they're kind of getting carried away, wondering about, well, maybe I'm going to have a lot of kids who move out, or they take their material with them and I can't pass it on to the new kid who comes in, or they.
Yep, great question. So as it relates to declining enrollment, I would need to look into that or defer to management. But I know the school sites that we talk to in these instances and ask, like, okay, what does the surplus inventory come from? They were also the same school sites that indicated they were not necessarily speaking to each of the instructors about what they need, what course is being enrolled. We did have an instance where a textbook manager was having that direct communication with instructors and saying, what do you need? What courses are being offered? Can we use this material also for this course? Does that make sense? Did you like using this material last year, yes or no? And then having a more tailored order. And then there were schools that didn't do that, and it was strictly just based off of, okay, how many kids do we think we're going to have? So same schools that we talked to had those same struggles as the ones with the surplus. But again, as it relates to the enrollment, I would have to look into that or defer to management.
Yeah, I'd wonder about that, because I think part of the, why we're not set up for success in this, just by nature of the game that we have to play, is that we pick a number, let's say 1,000 kids are going to take this course, and when we adopt the thing, we say there are 1,000, we're going to place an order for 1,000 books, and then we're locked into paying for 1,000 books for all 5 years of that contract. But if the enrollment goes up, we'll pay extra. If the enrollment goes down, we're still paying for books that we're not going to use. And so my wondering is some of this inventory related to that? I don't know, because, we've already paid for those books because I don't know.
Nope, that makes total sense. And that was one of the discussion points that we had with management on there, related to timing. Textbook orders are submitted in March prior to finalizing student enrollment, or July and August. So with that timeline, there's absolutely risk for us to submit an order, then we get the enrollment data and we're like, okay, wait, that was too much. So I think the management team has already identified that staggered approach to ordering to try and assist. And then also that coordinating the date for the master schedule submission and including the curriculum department as part of that process, I think is another identified area where we might be able to alleviate that.
It seemed like to me, because as you were articulating what one school does with the coordination, the communication with the teachers and all the departments, that must be your exemplar school, I would sense. And so that seems like that would be best practices, but it's not in here as a recommendation, unless I'm missing it.
We have enhanced additional collaboration between textbook managers and instructors to obtain additional insight into order preferences. It goes on. It's a third bullet point in the recommendation. To your point, though, we did want to address that recommendation, but still leave it broad enough for the management team to decide what works best. Once we actually start implementing, you may need a pivot. So we tried to include the language I just mentioned in bullet point number 3, but also wanted to make sure we gave some wiggle room.
It reads a little different than you said it. I like the way you said it better than.
All right, was anyone taking notes on what I said? We'll go back and let it.
Thank you.
It seems like that's really a tough job, is managing that inventory.
Textbook managers have a lot of responsibility, and so we wanted flexibility in that recommendation to acknowledge that they're balancing a lot of workload while giving management the opportunity to explore what opportunities to improve the process may look like.
And for my edification, is that a position at a school?
So one of my questions, I think, when we first met was I was interested in knowing who is doing that job at the schools. How many of them are assistant principals? How many of them are load-bearing instructors? How many of them are non-load-bearing instructors? Did you all ever come to a conclusion on who these people are, how that comprises, and just to get a sense of how much they've got on their plates, because and if you've got a lot on your plates, it's hard to manage all this.
I think
Yeah, no,
management
Who
might
is
be
it?
able to
Excuse me.
add
Yeah,
insight to that.
You need to come up to the microphone.
I'm gonna have to bring my person there.
That would be you, right? So that's good.
So, I do want to acknowledge that Kelly Dodd and Ileana are here, and they are the masters of this piece. I came into this obviously very late in the audit process, but I can answer that question.
Okay.
There are 22 textbook managers that are APs. Assistant principals is their primary role. There are 9 that are coaches, some kind of instructional coach at the school level. There are 5 that are deans, and 8 that are media specialists. So while somebody does have the role of textbook manager, it is not a job by itself.
Yeah. So
They
I
have
think
many other roles as well.
So I think it's important to kind of just process things through that particular lens, and that they've got plenty of instructional duties throughout the day and being the leaders of their schools. And then they're also trying to be warehousers at the same time. But it's a lot of hats.
Is there a stipend or anything tied to that assignment?
Not that I'm aware of.
There
No.
is not.
No, sir.
Okay.
Any other questions for Dr. Feltner? Mrs.
Thanks for
Dodd?
that. That was great data.
I guess my question would be, is there any indication that housing it within the media specialist works better than the assistant principal or vice versa, or any of those other roles? Did we find any efficiencies with who was managing the textbooks, or is it really just an approach of how the school was doing it?
I don't think that we have data to support any opinion.
Okay.
I mean.
Who was the exemplar?
Right.
Who's a media specialist?
A media specialist?
Traditionally, it's given to an assistant principal. I had it as an assistant principal, but you have other targeted people who help you, like the grade level chairs or the department chairs, and they actually do the bulk of the work. The textbook manager, him or herself, isn't the person who's physically doing the majority of the work.
I do want to reiterate, just to be fully transparent, the exemplar is a smaller elementary school of ours. So the difference in the amount of materials could influence possibly.
But I thought we took the highest risk, highest purchasers.
It-
A few minutes ago, didn't we say that?
It could be not highest when we look at all schools, but when we're taking a look at school blocks,
It's the highest of the elementary schools.
it's one of the highest. I'd need to confirm if it is the highest, but we certainly don't include middle or low.
Ms. Feltner, do you know?
I know that the school was Seminole Springs Elementary School.
That's not enormous.
That was the exemplar, or that was
That was the exemplar.
included? Okay,
That is
and they were
correct.
not included in your,
They were.
They were.
know.
They were.
Yep.
as one of the larger schools?
That's small.
To clarify,
I'm afraid you missed the discussion about
Yeah, I did. I'll be
sampling,
quiet.
random sampling, and
I'll be
whether it
quiet.
was truly random or not, and that methodology. But
Ms. Fellner, to clarify, are we smaller school by enrollment number or smaller school by spend?
By enrollment number.
So that might be the point of clarification. While it may be smaller by enrollment, by spend on instructional material, it was one of the higher represented elementary schools.
That doesn't make sense to me.
me neither, right? If they're an exemplar and they're a small school, then they're probably not over ordering, right? So why are they so high in volume if they're lower in
Because they may
enrollment?
choose to buy other instructional materials that some schools don't purchase. So that you're talking about the amount of money they spend, right?
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
I need to correct myself, Dr. Feltner.
I think my comment to this would be at this point, I mean, I agree with what you're saying, Mr. Dodd. If it would make you feel better to make it say selected schools instead of sample schools, then that could, no, I don't mean that in
I'm
a,
really ready to get past that. It just keeps coming back to this, that this sample
Right.
looks wonky.
I get
when
it,
we're
but I think
talking
the
about
challenge
this-
is we're
this-
looking at 5 schools out of time and a cost basis. So if we had 10 or 15 and can get a true sampling of what's going on, trying to get some best practices of what is working in one maybe, or what are some areas to improve in the others. I don't take any of this as critical, or like we're looking at staff saying they're doing a poor job. I think it's a large line item. We're going through challenges and budgets and trying to see where we can tighten as much as possible and know that we're going to have some declining enrollment and issues where we're going to over-order in certain areas. But I don't take any of this as we're overly critical on staff or thinking schools aren't doing a good job, just trying to get a baseline of where we are today and how we can improve.
No, and I agree with that statement. Certainly, we want to improve. I'm just, I guess, eagerly awaiting to hear where the cost savings are in your audit, because as I read through, I thought the ideas didn't come from you; they came from all the brilliant people in that department. And so, I'm just wondering, did you all approach this from a compliance piece or from a efficiency/savings side of things?
Both. And I will mention the inventory control procedures. While that is the back end, the material's already been ordered, it directly feeds into how we are approaching the next order. So we take a look at it from compliance with what are the established policies and procedures, what is in compliance with what we heard the expectations are, and then also while we're walking school sites, while we're having discussions with technical managers and the team, how can we make this process better, more efficient, have less surplus, et cetera. So I would say it's from both lenses.
You answered it very well.
I can move to observation number 3.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Sure. Observation number 3 is instructional material utilization and reporting. Again, this is one of those, to your point earlier, this is one of those areas where we can establish some stronger controls as it relates to tracking what materials we're using in order to make informed decisions into what materials we need. So down the road, that can potentially be a cost savings. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. What we found here is that there's not currently a formalized process to monitor the use of our adopted digital instruction materials across grade levels and subject areas. Some of the providers that we have at the district offer a dashboard that says, here's how much, what your utilization has been for a particular digital product. Others don't have that. The district does have a report called Catch On, or a system called Catch On, that can track utilization. It was established for other reasons, but it could potentially be leveraged to track utilization of digital materials as well. And the recommendation there is to start getting an idea of how much of our instructional materials that are purchased, some of them are bundled and they come for free, and you may not want to decide to spend the time or energy looking at those, and I think that's very understandable. Some of them that we may be paying for, whether it be supplemental or part of the larger bulk purchases, if we can get an idea of how much you're being used, how much you're being logged on, what the data suggests for how often a child is actually interacting with that product, that may help drive some data-informed decisions on what we actually need to purchase moving forward. And then the second part of this observation is related to supplemental instructional material. And in that instance, we did find that while there may be some spend by school reports, there's currently not a process to review those reports to identify any trends in what's being ordered from a supplemental perspective. So again, this is outside of those bulk purchases that we know are going to occur, but may be occurring at individual sites. But seeing if there are any trends in how we can group purchases together, potentially save by getting discounted pricing, avoid unnecessary delivery costs, identify any opportunities to scale, that type of data. I think the data likely exists, but it's not part of a regular review process where we would be able to identify that opportunity real time. So recommendations, I think, are pretty straightforward. I kind of explained them in that in my summary just then. Management action plan is to use that system that I mentioned earlier, Catch On, for monitoring digital license utilization for digital-based courses. Also going to be using Destiny, that's an inventory system for tracking consumable materials at the school and district levels. So I think, again, both of these systems have been in place. We're just talking about using that data in a more intentional way to look at what we're doing next year or the next adoption cycle. Similarly, management stated that there are plans to increase communication with the school leaders regarding those specialized courses being offered at the school site and coordinate around school-based supplemental materials. And all of those actions are something that's going to be implemented on an ongoing basis.
One of the questions I'd also asked in our pre-audit interview was about some of the delays in sometimes getting those digital licenses activated. Sometimes a good amount of time goes, and I was wondering is that an IT challenge, or is it a publisher challenge, or is it kind of a combination of both, or did y'all look at that?
Yeah, Catch On, that system that I mentioned earlier, could potentially track, hey, here's where we're getting the actual folks logging in, and here's where we report it. That's not.
No, I don't think you're understanding the question. We're like, our students or teachers don't have access. Like, it hasn't activated yet. So of course, Ketron's going to say they've got zero usage. That I know sometimes there are courses, and for whatever reason, the digital access doesn't go live until maybe you're weeks or months into the school year. And I don't know much about that process. Certainly, that is way over my head. And so that's why I had that was one of my questions going into the pre-audit.
Yep.
But it doesn't sound like y'all had a chance to look at that one.
We talk about it with the textbook managers on site to try and get an understanding of where that potential delay with digital licenses could be. And there wasn't any cited anecdotes that would say it was a publisher issue. So I do think setting up the information that we talked about earlier in the recommendation and the management action plan will help identify when that is occurring and what the issue is.
Okay.
Observation number 4. Here we did take a look at what are the expectations. I've talked a lot about compliance to expectations, what the expectations are for textbook managers who already have a lot on their plate. And we wanted to take a look, okay, what is the documentation for succession planning or to teach a new textbook manager or to teach someone new in the curriculum department how to most effectively do their role. And we did identify just some instances in where there's some key activities that are not yet written in a detailed procedure. I think overwhelmingly, and you mentioned this earlier, Mr. Dodd, is that the team is extremely knowledgeable. Losing any team member for any reason would be an absolute loss of institutional knowledge, and there's so much work that's being done behind the scenes that's not necessarily documented. If for any reason, we always use the situation, if someone wins the lottery and they leave, then that individual who comes in to take their place would have a lot of learning to do. So we just want to make sure that there's specific written guidance so that that person can kind of take off the ground running. And the team has indicated that they will be developing roles and responsibilities specifically for the instructional materials and media services manager in August 2026. Questions, comments? Okay. I will talk next about process improvement opportunities. So process improvement opportunities are a little different in that they're not necessarily reported observations. They're more just instances where we identified something could be considered to tighten something up, whether it's a process or maybe we have something in place and we would recommend considering going about that process in a slightly different way. The first one here is coordination of excess inventory. We did find, based off of our discussion with individual school sites, that schools with that surplus inventory are really communicating their availability of surplus inventory outwards. So in many cases, the surplus inventory that we identified on site, it had just been sitting there for a long time, not necessarily, there was no indication that everyone knew that that surplus inventory existed. And if there's a school that has an unmet need, we would want to just enhance that coordination. We do know that the Curriculum Instruction and Assessment Department does coordinate the use of surplus inventory, but of course that's an additional task that may not be done consistently or at a regular cadence. So we do recommend considering and implementing a centralized surplus reporting procedure so that schools can kind of take ownership of that surplus inventory that exists and distribute it outwards if necessary. And then the last process improvement opportunity is material adoption feedback. Right now, there is certainly a strong culture and practice of engaging with teachers in the instructional materials adoption and ordering process through the use of surveys. We do note some opportunities to engage with those educators post-adoption to see what was working, what wasn't working, what data can we get that might be able to inform us in the next adoption cycle, potentially identify some cost savings if there's something that we don't need to order, if we can pivot in any way, because there was maybe a lot of supplemental material ordered instead. So here, just recommending that we enhance those survey procedures and maybe adding some post-adoption data points. I will pause. That was the entirety of the report, but now that we've gotten through all the observations, I'm happy to answer. Oh, I'll also mention there's survey results that start on page 23. That's essentially a raw data export of these survey results that we received. Based off of the responses received, we didn't notice any significant trends that indicated a strong opinion one way or the other. Sometimes we issue surveys and there is 80 to 100% of one response all the way down. And to us, that indicates there's obviously a strong opinion somewhere. Based off of the responses that we received, they were pretty mixed, which in most cases is a positive story to tell. But we did include that so you can take a look at the data itself. And again, we don't manipulate any of that data. It's simply just a export of what was received. Okay.
Is there a standard, like the completion rate's at 8%, and is there a standard that you guys typically, that makes data meaningful? This seems really low.
When was it sent out?
Yeah,
Remind me?
I was going to ask that as well.
August 8th, I believe it was. We delayed, as you may recall.
The first week of school.
We had left it open for several weeks after that. But we delayed initially because we didn't want to send it out during the summer and only
remember
receive
that.
responses from certain instructors that may be online working and completely omit the others that didn't. So we delayed starting the survey, and then we left the survey open as long as we could in order to present this on time.
It looks like I see it in the box here, 8th to the 15th, so they had a week.
They revised of the survey, of the 15th. You may need to.
So they had the first week of school and the first weekend of school to do the survey. That's probably why I think we got 8%.
Well, and I wonder also, did it go out to teachers specifically, like the listserv, was it sent to teachers in the district?
Yes.
Correct, yes, ma'am.
And we coordinated through IT to push out that notification out.
Did you guys communicate with LCA at all to help spread the word about the survey?
We actually met with LCA before sending the survey and got their feedback as well.
Right, not feedback about the survey, but like, they can sometimes help at the school site by saying, hey, there's a survey coming out, so people are kind of overwhelmed with the start of school or pre-planning. Was that coordinated or just the input on the survey, the data in the survey?
And to know it's not spam, right? I mean, if I hear it from LCA, then I know, oh, this is pretty legitimate. This is actually specific to Lake County.
And, oh, God.
I believe the link, as well as additional follow-up reminders to complete the survey, were sent out over
Via
the
email.
duration of that piece. Yes, correct, through email.
And that would be a great comment for LCEA. I'm not sure if you had done any additional communication outside of what we did through IT. Okay. I didn't want to speak on behalf of you. Thank you.
Well, I'm not sure that they were aware that the survey was going out, right?
I am interested, Elizabeth, and if you don't mind coming to the podium, hearing, now that you've sat through the presentation, I do want to make one comment. This would have been really nice if we had this in our hands before sitting here and trying to absorb all this.
Yeah, I agree.
Our understanding was that this was sent out with the agenda a week in advance.
Wasn't to me.
I saw it yesterday.
I don't know which day it hit board docs. Yesterday was the first chance I had to look at it, but
Okay. That could be we'll double check our communication. Our understanding is that we sent it out at least a week in advance to make sure that everyone had time to read. But if we need to maybe send it out 2 weeks in advance or coordinate a different way, we're happy to do that moving forward.
So now that you've heard the presentation, what do you think?
Well, to Dr. Luke's point, I think we would have loved to know when it was going out so we could elevate it and let our teachers know. I mean, y'all know the first week of school is crazy. They get tons of emails. So if there was some way to communicate that to get better survey data, I think that would be great, and we would love to help support that. I think, like Mark Dodd mentioned, I am curious about some of the other schools, and I think there's definitely a lot to look at here. It's a very vast, complex piece, but I think it is something worth looking at and trying to make some adjustments. So I'm not an expert in this area. I think obviously there are some folks in the room that could probably speak to more. So, but from what I heard today, those are my quick takeaways.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Feldner, you have anything to add after hearing the, or Mrs. Dodd, or?
I have a question, if I may, for Mrs. Dodd. Do you ever have communication with instructional leaders in the schools as to what the textbook managers, like, for example, with the survey that went out, were the textbook managers notified, and maybe this is part of yours, that this is going out? And so you need to encourage, because they're the people that have the direct communication with the teachers. They're also the people who have the authority to put some teeth into it. So do we let them know that this is going out and these are the dates and you need to announce it, in faculty meeting or whatever?
Great question. And yes, ma'am, we actually shared it at the textbook manager meeting that the audit was beginning, and also that there was a survey coming. So they knew, and we shared that survey through Focus so that it would go directly to the teachers as well. I think they weren't sure when the survey was coming out because, again, we shared that at the end of the year at the textbook manager meeting, and we did not meet again before the survey came out. So they didn't have the exact timeline for the survey, but they knew that it was coming. They knew to expect it.
All right, thank you.
Do you have any other comments? You want to?
I would just say that it was a pleasure working with the audit team. It was tricky for me, and I feel like it was tricky in the respect that it was select schools, and those schools were identified as schools that have more difficulty getting to textbook manager meetings or submitting paperwork that we needed. So it was not a surprise to me that maybe they had more inventory. It is a regular procedure that we talk about in textbook manager meetings about looking at counting your materials before you order each year, and I want to say that our textbook managers really do a great job using the email lists to reach out to other textbook managers when they're short materials and navigating when they do have surplus sharing materials. That is like a very busy place at the beginning of the year, and they know to reach out to Ileana and I if they cannot find those materials they need, and we try to really quickly resolve that issue. And we actually, Destiny has a new system, sorry, I'm a little under the weather, a new system that allows for us to track consumables that they came out with this year. So when we rolled out the science adoption this year, the consumables are now being tracked within Destiny, so we know at any given time how many consumables they have in their possession, and we plan to do that with each new adoption as we roll out those adoptions. That's going to really help with the inventory management that the auditors mentioned.
Did you say that some schools don't show up when you have a?
Yes, it is tricky because, again, this is not like a specific job. It is a role that they have. So I know the question was asked earlier about positions, and I think that it is more challenging often for an AP to get to a meeting than it might be for others, although media specialists do a great job because they are very knowledgeable of Destiny, which is how we track textbooks. But they do wear a lot of hats as well. I think all of these individuals wear a lot of hats, and I understand that they are feeling very stretched. So I don't think it's intentional that people miss meetings, but I think that they're feeling like they have a lot going on at their school campus, and sometimes they can't get away. That the meeting information is still shared with the textbook managers following the meeting, so they can definitely go through and look at the documents they missed and that kind of thing as well.
And is the meeting in person or Zoom?
Great question, too. We have two in person. We have the beginning of the year in person as we talk about new adoptions and all the rollouts. The second meeting of the year is virtual, so they can come meet and tune in with us with a variety of options for that meeting. The third one is getting ready for ordering, and that one is also in person, and then the last one is also virtual. And I wanted to mention, too, real quick, if it's okay, the timeline for ordering is tricky. I know that one of the things that was mentioned was a proposal for maybe moving that back a little bit. The hard thing with that is that we can start placing orders as of April 1 with FSBD, and we really have to start placing orders as of April 1 with FSBD in order to get materials to the warehouse to barcode them in early July and then get them to schools for the first day of school. It's like a line at Disney. The earlier you get in line, the better spot you get, and the earlier you're going to get your materials. So many things, even as it is, and I think we're one of the earliest orders, are back ordered, so we have to wait for materials, and it creates more time on our warehouse guys' hands to ship materials after they arrive later, multiple trips, that kind of thing as well. So we really do like to get the orders out as soon as possible, and we try to delay anything that we can, anything that's digital only materials. We try to wait for those orders so that we have more finalized numbers once enrollment is complete and scheduling is complete at the high schools.
So again, this is educating me.
Yeah.
So at the school level, they aggregate what they're going to need.
Yes.
They feed it to you?
Yes, there is a Google Doc, and it's a Google Sheet, and they input what they have, what they need for each subject area, for each course, and they subtract out what they currently have in their possession, so they give us a final order for each thing, and they share it on a Google Sheet. We use that Google Sheet to go through and place the school's orders, but first we compare it with growth planning numbers and also our focus enrollment numbers. But again, since we often don't have like a final date for enrollment, so we're watching to see when seats are filled at schools to know exactly what the enrollment And IT has been great. They have set up like my own little special focus report that can show me, I can search by course and I can see how many seats are filled and how many seats are awaiting or requested. So I know, I can kind of tell when it's closed out or when it's not. And I can see the percent finalized of a school for their scheduling. We've done this for years, but we do elementary orders first because they're easier. Middle school orders are due second. High school orders are due at the end of March. So we try to build in more time for high school because we know it's trickier for building schedules. I know, if I'm in first grade, I'm going to second grade next year. So
And you're placing that order, your department?
yes, we place that order. We start placing those orders right
You're
at
looking
April 1.
all the schools and then trying to get
Yes, we place all those orders.
total list.
Yes,
Very good.
Awesome.
Sounds like a lot of work
it is. We have a great team.
and a lot of money.
Yes, it is a lot of money too.
And your
Thank
team
you.
is 3?
It's the two of us.
2?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly.
Can I
Dr.
go, I'm just going to go back to my original question. What typically, and this is for me going forward and understanding your audits, what is your percentage response rate that you consider statistically impactful for the data to be meaningful?
It's a great, it's a great question. Obviously, we would prefer as high a completion rate as possible. If you're looking for like a statistical confidence number, that's something that we could give you. I'm unfortunately I can't do that in my head, but you can calculate it. Claire, did you want to?
I was just going to say, the survey was more for informational purposes, for informational gathering. In the few instances that we do send out surveys as part of our internal audits, again, it's for more informational purposes, so not from a statistical perspective, et cetera.
That gives me just concern because some of the conversation that we're having, I know it's informational data, but it's informational to drive decisions and funding and procedures that we need to have in place. And it seems, I can see benefit in this. I don't mean to, I'm not trying to be argumentative. I just want to know, like, when you're looking for information from a district that's this size, is there a typical threshold that you look for the information to be indicative of the district?
Usually
Their
it's
sample size.
like, we like it when it's over 50% because that kind of gives us more of a better basis, but this one was pretty low.
Yeah.
But typically, once we get above 50%, it does give us a better kind of insight and be able to give a better basis of what it is
Right.
that we're looking at.
Right. So is there a point in your procedures that you say, okay, we're going to try this again because the return rate was so low?
We went back and forth when we did receive the results, because when they first presented it to me, I was like, wow, this is pretty low from what we've seen, elsewhere. Again, the few instances that we do send surveys as part of the audits that we do, because typically it's just pertaining to the audit, the process, the risk controls that we're testing. So I talked to the team about what was the communication, what were the reminders, all of that, and it went through the process that I would have expected to kind of go through, from that communication lens, and this is just where it ended up at.
And, because I think there's potential here I'd love to know the answers to some of these questions, but, it's hard to put a lot of confidence in 8% return rate. Like, for instance, 30% of our people who responded said they occasionally, monthly, or never use district-supplied materials. I don't know. 67% of people are purchasing additional supplemental instructional materials to complement what we're providing. 30% aren't even using what we're providing. Why? 82% of the people are using their personal funds to pay for these materials. And you look at it here, and it's going to online teacher-paid teacher sort of content. It just makes me wonder. Are there some things here from a curriculum side of things that we need to address, or maybe not, because 8% return rate.
Right.
So I'm not going to jump out being alarmed at these.
Right.
But it's a wondering I'm left with.
Right. We were left with that same wondering as well when we received it, and we didn't want to not include it because we talked about this. We said we were going to do this, so we didn't want to keep those results from you all.
So if I can make a comment, I think part of this is also an issue of timing. We finally got on board with RSM in March or April. We started this as one of our first audits out the gate in April, May. This is one of the 3 that we targeted as let's get started. And then it was a matter of, okay, in hindsight, we start at the end of the school year. They did the bulk of their work, or started to then, starting in the middle of the summer. And then we got to the survey part, and okay, let's wait for teachers to come back and be able to get some results. And then it's like, okay, we need to report this audit back within a reasonable time frame. So I don't think any of this was purposeful. I'm not saying you guys are saying that, but it's also a standpoint of I don't think 250 responses is nothing. I wouldn't make big changes off of this data, but I would certainly agree with 80% of teachers are purchasing some materials on their own. I don't think that's out of the ordinary. I don't think somewhere within a standard deviation of 30% of teachers aren't using their instruction materials. I don't think that is out of the ordinary. I'm also not looking to make big decisions on this, but I think what point I just want to drive home is first and foremost, Kelly and Ileana, thank you for the work you do. It does not go unnoticed on us, and I don't think anything in this report is negative to what you two do or what our textbook managers are doing. I think we're wearing a lot of hats, we're doing a lot of roles, and it's going to be incumbent on our school leaders to try to levy out this workload a little bit more and get some more hands involved to be able to do some of these areas in inventory control. Again, I agree the selected group is small, but if we're looking at these in bulks of access and security controls or storage practices or end-of-year documentation, inventory plans, et cetera, I think it's good information to be able to take back to our principals and APs and the rest of the folks that are wearing these hats as textbook managers and try to clean up controls where we can to try to make these materials go further. So I don't want it to get lost that this is overly critical on anybody or that RSM didn't live up to what we told them to do from inventory controls. I think it's a matter of here's where we are, here's where we can improve. We can always do better communication on both ends. We can always get more responses. But I think this still leaves us with information that we can take back to do a better job at the board level of divvying out resources, making sure we're keeping an eye on instruction materials to control the big cost of it. So I think we're just getting very emotional in certain ways in this, and I don't want that to get lost from the overall message of you guys first and foremost do a great job, and so do our textbook managers, but how can we improve in meaningful ways or control the overuse or the digital utilization or whatever else and just get those easy wins to make these dollars go further. So I just felt like that needed to be said.
So the teacher survey, does that belong to us? That if we wanted to send it out again, we could, rather than pay y'all? I would be inclined for us to do that, because I think we could, I think we could send it out if we felt like we needed another one on our own and look at the data ourselves without involving y'all. Sorry. My other takeaway is that I want to be quiet for a minute and listen to Mrs. Cunningham, who had to do this for years. And we heard of 3 different groups that handle books right now. Should it be that, or should it be the media specialist or the AP?
I think that different personalities in different schools do things better. That's why I think it's vital that we involve the instructional leaders at those schools, because if it is the mindset of the principal, this is important, and they remind their textbook manager, you got a meeting today, and they receive the notifications, right, Mrs. Dodd, that there's going to be a meeting? The principal does, so they can remind their people. My take on this is I've had some great textbook managers in my career, and I've had some not so good ones. I've had some that I had to ride all the time, and others that just did what they were supposed to do. I think the beauty of this report is, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not surprised by anything you said. I'm not even surprised by the number of people that completed the survey. I think there are lots of things that contribute to that, and the timing of it certainly had to do with it. But I also think that people think things are important if the people who do their evaluation think that they're important. So if we decide that textbook managers need to do the responsibilities that have been assigned to them, then we need to communicate that to our leaders. This is an important job. We expect you to make sure that your people get it done. I have been a textbook manager, and I will tell you it's not an easy job, but it can be done. I've been a textbook manager in a high school and a middle school, so I get it. But I think overall, I share some of Tyler's sentiments. I appreciate the value of the work that you did. I think it definitely needs to be considered, and we definitely need to think about doing some things to beef it up and make sure some of these things happen. I don't have a concern about the sampling, because I have been through a lot of audits, Title I, ESE, and all those things, and they generally choose the schools the same way you did. And usually you get similar results. You're going to have outliers that are great places, and they don't get checked. And so, you get a bad report or what could be viewed as a bad report. But basically, the bottom line is the things that can be changed, they need to be changed in the schools where they're needed. And if there's a place where people are doing an excellent job, they need to be congratulated and told that they're doing an excellent job. I appreciate the information. I think that's the way it was supposed to be, and I think you did what we asked you to do. So thank you. Does that answer your question, sir?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Did y'all come up with any dollar amount that you could see as a savings if we implemented?
We talked about this whenever we first met you all, when we're talking about internal audit, what can internal audit bring to the table? And I believe it was you that asked the question about return on investment. And typically, it's hard to put a dollar around return on investment for internal audit because what we're doing is we're mitigating your risk. We're mitigating your exposure, making sure that your controls are in place, your processes are designed effectively, and your controls are operating effectively. So that return on investment is always a hard number to put together.
But if we're buying in surplus of, what was it, the range?
Yeah.
29.
And if you look at some of the observations and the recommendations, there's some data points that need to be in place to be able to forward think and be able to understand some of those costs as well. So, I think it was observation number 3 when we were talking, I believe it was 3, when we were talking about some of the data points on the digital side and being able to determine the use, et cetera. So that's just as an example of, it's hard to put together that for this particular example. It was hard. We weren't able to put together cost savings because we need some of those data points as well in order to be able to do that.
Any other comments? All right. Thank you guys very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Is that all you guys have for us today?
Well, we had also, I believe that the package that we had sent last week included the top 10 that we had previously reported out to you all.
Yes.
We got started late in this fiscal year for these 3 projects. So if you wanted to discuss today the top 10 that was issued in December of 2024, we could start talking about potential topics for this fiscal year so we can get started sooner so we're not doing them all at one time either and spread it out more for management, district management, et cetera. So we're happy to talk about it today or we're happy to talk about it at another time.
I don't know if I'm the minority opinion on the board, but I'd rather hold off on that because I'm honestly interested in knowing which other sort of internal audit options exist. And I'd be certainly very interested in having the superintendent's opinion and direction on those areas as well, on which areas she thinks are of particular importance for us to look at.
Sure.
But like I said, I could be the minority opinion, so.
Dr. Luke?
I'm
Mrs. Cunningham?
I don't have a problem with that.
Mr. Mathias?
You don't have a problem with waiting.
That's what I'm
I think that's
gathering.
prudent.
Yeah, I agree too, especially with the superintendent being out. Let's schedule another time to get
Okay.
together and go over that information and regroup on that one.
Sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you guys very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any board member comments?
I do want to say thank you to Sawgrass Bay Elementary School. We spent the day there yesterday. It was a professional learning day for our semester 2 students, and they got to walk classrooms and the things that we saw in that school. The instruction was amazing. So I'm looking at you so that you know that anytime a school is willing to open their doors for learning, it's always just incredible partnership. And the learning that we saw was fantastic. Our focus was on mathematics and ESOL. And we really got to see some great things and some great strategies being used. In every classroom we walked, it felt very urgent. The instruction felt relevant. It was standards-based. Kids were engaged. It was great discussion for our students. I think my favorite part of the day was after the instructional walkthroughs, the instructional rounds that we walked classrooms, I had them identify what were some best practices they saw in mathematics and what were some best practices they saw with ESOL learning and where those overlapped. And we made a really good list. And then they had the opportunity to do like a fishbowl experience with students where we had small groups of kids come in and they taught while their partner observed, and then they switched roles and we had another group come in, long story longer, when we were going over what they did and the best practices that they implement in their lessons. I was able to go back to that list and identify areas that they did not use in their lesson that we saw teachers using. And I felt like that was pretty impactful for them to go, oh, yeah, we did identify that, and those are some things we could have done, which, again, anytime we can anytime we can challenge practice and push teachers to be better, future teachers to be better, it's a win for our students. So I just wanted to say Mr. Lokeson and both of his APs, Mrs. Torres and Mrs. Estro, were involved in the planning of that day and the setting up the walks, and the teachers did a phenomenal job. So we appreciate the partnership and preparing teachers for Lake County. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Luke. Mrs. Cunningham?
I guess I'd like to say this as a final comment about the audit. You know, anytime you audit something, especially if it's forensic, if it's after it happened, you're going to find stuff. Otherwise, what's the point? And that's the only way you can improve. So I think it's important that people go into those with an open mind and understanding that if the auditor does their job, they may find something that's not totally pleasant. And as a result of that, it's incumbent upon the person that was audited to come up with a plan to do better. I can tell you that textbooks and textbook inventories have been a challenging item in Lake County for at least the past 35 years. We've lost a lot of money on textbooks. We've lost a lot of textbooks. I'm going to share a personal story with you that broke my heart. When I first got elected to the board, I went to a school, and it will remain nameless. I went into their textbook room where they keep textbooks, and I found materials that I ordered as a principal, supplemental materials that I spent Title I dollars for, about $45,000. Those books were still on the shelf, never been opened, never been used. And that I'd been gone from that school like 5 years. And I remember thinking to myself, how can this be? This is a failing school. They got some great reading material on the shelf. And when I mentioned it to the powers that be, they said, oh, really? We have that? So I guess what I'm saying to you is it's important to recognize when someone points out something. Maybe we just need to come up with a system to make sure it's better. There are lots of things that deserve attention. Textbooks certainly is one of those. I think Mrs. Dodd does a great job. The young lady with her does a great job. I think the curriculum department does a good job. I don't think because you find something in an audit that it means that anyone didn't do their job or that they're not doing their job well. I think it just means that we're not perfect. And we brought in someone to point out those things to us, and it's incumbent upon us to work to make them better. So that's my philosophy about life. When things aren't as they should be, you just work to make them better. So I challenge all of us to let's do that with this audit and any other audits we should or might receive in the future. Thank you.
Well said.
Chairman, may I really quickly?
Yes, ma'am.
I did want to apologize. It was a very, very important call that went over time that was allotted with the Florida Department of Education. So, and I didn't get the materials. And that, again, this is new for us. This is the first time you guys have come back with an audit. I got the email yesterday, so I was kind of like, whoa, what is this? But I'm sorry that I missed the conversation. And it was a really important phone call, but this was important as well. So I did want you guys to know that I tried to get it done. So,
Mr. Judd?
thank you.
My greatest takeaway from these audits is just really how great our people are. That while certainly you always have the opportunity to do things better, I don't think anybody does it better than what we do. When we looked at that procurement audit and just how forward-thinking we were on instructional materials, I would put this up against any other district in the state, any one of these, and say, I think we got something that's worth bragging about. And then the other thing that's just really worth bragging about, I'll piggyback on Dr. Luke's comment about the PL Day at Sawgrass Bay. It's also a great bit of gratitude to the district and all these principals who have, let's say, a paraprofessional who's working in their school full-time, but releases them to go get this professional learning. That is just going to pay dividends on the back end for those people and their growth and the impact that they're going to have on students and fulfills these students' dream of becoming a teacher and getting that degree. So I'm just really grateful and thankful to all of these people who make that partnership possible. You're right, a very, very wonderful day.
Mr. Mathias?
Yeah. So one of the concerns I always have is, and I didn't take anything negative, to be quite honest, to Mrs. Cunningham. It's a learning experience, and you guys are like the Internal Revenue when they come to audit my company. You know they're going to find something, right? It's just expected. And so, but then it's what do we do with these reports afterwards? And that has been an ongoing concern when we had our internal auditor that was staff, to now what are next steps for the district to look at how do we support these two procurement functions. And so if we take this today and we go, gosh, we spent 2 hours, that was nice, and you guys are all warm, we're doing a wonderful job. We're missing a great opportunity, in my opinion, that, for us to actually be better. So that's where my head is.
Well said. Yeah, I think I've already said what I wanted to say on this one. Again, thank you, Kelly and Eliana. Thank you, Ollie, when he was here. Thank you, RSM. And I agree, Mr. Dodd, we certainly have wonderful staffs in both of those departments and throughout this district. And as Mr. Mathias said, looking forward to using this information to make us even just that much more better. So thank you all for that. Had one comment that I wanted to make. Had the opportunity to attend the Lake Economic Area Development annual dinner last week with Francis and Martin, the CCR team, where the business community recognized the school district for our A rating and all the work that we've done with CTE programs and growing that throughout the county. So just wanted to share that with the board and with staff that that is not going unnoticed in the business community. And as growth continues to come to Lake, more of the high quality, smart growth that we all hope to get when people look at how your school system's performing, what that means when you choose to move your family. We are certainly moving in the right direction. That is helping Lake as a whole. And that was shared with us last week. So just want to pass that on back to you guys as well. Mr. Deputy Superintendent, do you have any comments?
Just like to say, for the two groups that were subject to the audit, I concur, great job. I was especially impressed with the action plan steps that were put in place immediately with instructional materials. Obviously taking it as an opportunity, and while you guys can't be perfect, I know that you are perfectionists, and I know those action plans that they put in place, they will definitely move forward on those, and we'll continue to learn and grow. And getting to work every day with procurement and the purchasing process, I can say Ollie and his team, they're great also. They are always looking to improve every single day. So I think they'll use this audit as a tool, and we'll continue to get better. And I agree with Mr. Dodd, I think we are the best. So that's all I have.
I'm sorry, I had one more comment.
Go ahead.
So, and the fact that we're the only district that interviews the last three, it has worked extremely well for us. So you may want to carry that one.
Walton does it as well. One of the two that I know of.
You may want to carry that forward as how great we are. That's it.
Any other comments? All right. Thank you, everybody. We are adjourned.